And just as when the root of a tree is watered, every leaf of the tree benefits, so when the soul reawakens its dormant love for God, their love expands to reach every living being. This is the highest, most complete state of consciousness, and the most completely satisfying state of consciousness. This is Atma Supersiddhiti, the complete satisfaction of the soul. Bhakti Yoga has a lot of the elements from the other three paths. It has a beautiful ethical codes and meditative practices like Ashtanga Yoga. It has the same kind of illuminating knowledge application of Jnana Yoga. And like the path of Karma Yoga, there's no need to walk away from the world and family relationships to complete the path. So it's easier and more practical for most of us. But beyond this, Bhakti Yoga is especially pleasing and beautiful because the focus is on love. And love is the most beautiful aspect of our existence. So the practice can be very colorful and festive, more than the others. Bhakti Yoga engages all the cultural arts like music, dance, drama, and poetry. Much of the beauty and color of the Indian culture in general has grown directly from the Bhakti Shastras, the sacred text of Bhakti, like the Mahabharata and the Srimad Bhagavatam, both of which focus on devotion to Krishna, and the Ramayana, which focuses on devotion to Lord Ram. And let's be clear about this. Many Jnana yogis would consider love itself ultimately to be an illusion. Love requires a subject and an object. And that right there is dualism. Love requires two. And if any form of duality is illusion, and if in the end we realize that we have no separate individual consciousness, well then love itself is a state of illusion, something that ultimately has to be dismantled in the mind in order to achieve the highest truth. But texts like the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam present a very different idea. They say that we are individuals eternally, and that love is the highest truth. Love is the highest dharma. It's our purpose. It's what the soul is designed to do in eternity. That's why we all search for love in our lives. That's why themes of love continue to dominate the arts over the centuries. We're all searching for a higher love. So by this point, we've mentioned many times that what distinguishes one path of yoga from another is the particular strategy that it engages for dealing with the mind. In Bhakti Yoga, the strategy is to harmonize the mind with the nature of the self through practices that reawaken the natural propensity to love, and to focus that love on the root of all existence, or on God. That's the higher love. And just as when the root of a tree is watered, every leaf of the tree benefits, so when the soul reawakens its dormant love for God, their love expands to reach every living being. This is the highest, most complete state of consciousness, and the most completely satisfying state of consciousness. This is Atma Supersiddhiti, the complete satisfaction of the soul, when the yogi feels and sees the presence of God in everyone and everything, and simultaneously feels a special, intimate love for God as a person. Bhakti Yoga shares a lot of the similarities with the other paths, but in many ways it's very unique. Now, theoretically, one could practice Bhakti Yoga in a similar mode of the Ashtanga or Jnana yogis, and there are definitely examples within the sacred text of the tradition of celibate forest dwellers sitting quietly in seclusion, entering states of trance in which they relish divine love with Lord Vishnu or Krishna as the object of their meditation. But far more commonly, the Bhakti yogi will be socially engaged like the Karma yogi. The idea in Bhakti is that when love dominates the heart and mind, one can achieve a mind free of illusion without intense self-discipline. So although Bhakti Yoga certainly includes practices of mental focus like in Ashtanga Yoga, its emphasis is more on how to engage the mind rather than to still it. And although Bhakti Yogis recognize the problem with attachments in the mind, they don't aim to dismantle them like in Jnana Yoga, but to redirect them in a way that they become helpful. And the distinction between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is that although the Bhakti Yogi is most likely engaged with society, the Bhakti Yogi also has the explicit goal of reawakening divine love. That's what they're all about. So there are practices that are designed to awaken that kind of love that are central to Bhakti Yoga, and a Karma Yogi may not engage in. We'll get to those details a little later. But to keep it simple, one can try to understand Bhakti Yoga by considering how the sages of the Bhakti tradition pray, like this verse. As the minds of young girls take pleasure in thinking of young boys, and as the minds of young boys take pleasure in thinking of young girls, may my mind take pleasure always in you. Try to remember the first time you fell in love with someone. Think of the influence it had on your mind. You may recall that you achieved a level of focus similar to that of a great yogi. When people fall in love, they become detached. Things that were important to them before, things that occupied their minds before, they easily let go of because their minds have found a new focus. And it's a focus that one is pulled into naturally. So in Bhakti Yoga, the yogi's mind becomes captivated by love, deeply absorbed in all the attractive qualities of the divine. And the strength of focus in that particular object of focus acts as the most powerfully purifying meditation. Detachment, mental focus, all the important aspects of yoga on the path of bhakti, all of these manifest in their completeness by purification of the mind through the fire of divine love. Now, we opened up this discussion of Bhakti Yoga speaking about divine love. But before we go further, we need to speak a bit about what we mean by divinity or by God. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse that explains 3 ways of how the same one divine energy manifests. The sage named Sutta Goswami was clarifying the topic of divinity to a gathering of other forest sages. And he said this. He said, "Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. These are 3 manifestations of the same divine energies. It's the way the sages spoke of God. Brahman means formless divine energy devoid of personality, just conscious light. Paramatma is the same divine energy in the form of Lord Vishnu seated in the heart of every living being. And Bhagavan is again the same divine energy in the form of the original person possessing all attractive qualities. In essence, the sages of the yoga tradition are telling us that behind everything there's a divine consciousness or God. The bhakti yogis, while appreciating all manifestations of the same divine, are particularly focused on Bhagavan, the most personal aspect of divinity, understood to be the source of the other 2. Ultimately, behind everything, there's always personal energy. Behind a painting, there's always a painter. Behind a book, there's always an author. Behind a song, there's always a songwriter. Behind a virtual reality, there's always a designer. And behind all existence, behind all manifestations, both material and spiritual, there's Bhagavan, the divine form of divinity. This is the complete manifestation of divinity, revealing not only its eternality or all-pervasiveness, but also its form and its compassionate, loving nature. Bhagavan is the form of divinity that can be loved most intimately. The Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam reveal the identity of Bhagavan as Sri Krishna. Now, before I go further, there's an important point that needs to be made. In the minds of bhakti yogis, the idea of Bhagavan being defined as a particular person isn't seen as a sectarian claim, that one group has a connection to God and others don't. They see it more like when anyone from any genuine spiritual tradition speaks of God, then they're speaking of Krishna, the all-attractive original divine person. And bhakti means approaching the divine person with no other motive except for love. Bhakti basically means pure, unconditional love directed at the original person, the root of our existence. What I mean by that is that pure bhakti is characterized as love entirely free of selfish motive. If one prays for the things of this world, or even for relief of the pains of this world, that's not exactly pure bhakti. Both of these motives are very common in religion, but don't measure up to the purely spiritual idea of bhakti. In bhakti, one approaches God only out of love, and that means that whatever tradition we see people approach God only for love, that's considered to be bhakti, even when it's outside the yoga tradition. A Christian or a Jew or someone from any faith, if they conceive of God as a person and approach God only for the purpose of love, then that's bhakti. That being said, the ancient bhakti texts like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita present an extremely well-developed theology of Bhagavan in the form of Krishna. When people think of God, they may think of the creator or the judge. That's not the way you think of Krishna. Krishna is the original form of divinity that has absolutely no interest in creating the material world or judging its people. Krishna is only interested in adventures of love called Leela. Creation and judging, they're more like jobs. Krishna is only interested in play. The work of creation and judging can be delegated to others. The ancient Vedic literature from which the entire yoga tradition stems culminates in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses of Sanskrit poetry glorifying Bhakti Yoga. And the climax of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the 10th canto, which is 90 chapters on the Leela and character of Krishna. It's especially from these chapters that we get a picture, or you could say a meditational focus on God as a person, a playful God, a God of love and beauty, a God whose interest in love is so complete and exclusive that he becomes vulnerable to it. It's said that when you love God with intimacy, that God is conquered by that love, even that God becomes the plaything of those who love him. The sages say that Krishna's form isn't like material forms. Although it's visible and apparently conforms to linear constraints, it's unlimited, beyond the reach of the force of time or the laws that govern matter. The sages write that Krishna's form expands to become Vishnu, who enters the material realm and maintains it through its cycles. He expands still further to become the unlimited forms of Paramatma, the divine friend in the heart, accompanying every living being on his journey through the material realm. The effulgence expanding from Krishna's form is said to be the Brahman, the divine light sought after by the Jnana Yogis. Krishna's form also manifests as unlimited avatars, like Lord Ram or Lord Buddha, and even in animal-like forms, like Matsya, the fish, Kurma, the tortoise, and Narasimha, the half-man, half-lion avatar, who manifests divine fury for the protection of those who love him. The sages write of how Krishna takes on these forms for different practical purposes, but beyond the practical, the deeper reason always comes back to Krishna's playful nature. To facilitate the most beautiful and sacred play, Krishna's form expands to become Radha, the original divine manifestation of the feminine. Radha joins Krishna as the complete manifestation of God, Radha Krishna, goddess and God together, worshipped as a pair in the temples of India. The form of Radha is seen by Bhakti Yogis as, in one sense, even more sacred than that of Krishna, because whereas he's the object or focus of divine love, she's the personification of divine love, the love that the yogis aim to revive within themselves. The form of Radha expands to become unlimited gopis, divine youthful girls, lovers of Krishna, each of them permeated and vitalized by Radha's love. Together these girls dance with Radha and Krishna in a dance of divine love detailed in the Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto. The sages see their expressions of love in these chapters as the very pinnacle of the teachings of yoga. Now what I've just shared is getting into the more esoteric side of bhakti. It's a subject that requires much more time than the span of this lesson, but I've shared just a bit in order to present a picture of a personal God that may serve as a counterpoint to other popular ideas. God is vengeful. God is judgmental. This is a God who dances and plays the flute. So let's take a step back from the esoteric and look a bit more closely at the practice of Bhakti Yoga, how it works, and what it looks like in the life of a yogi. Bhakti Yogis believe that happiness through loving service is our true nature, and that false ideas impressed within our minds are the cause of our losing touch with our true nature and seeking happiness externally. So practically, how does a Bhakti Yogi deal with the mind? Well, there are practices in Bhakti Yoga, transformative practices designed to purify the mind through engaging it with powerful sources of spiritual energy. And in order to maintain that engagement, in order to keep the steady flow of the transformative energy alive, the yogi cultivates helpful conceptions, helpful sentiments, and a helpful lifestyle. Just like a good conductor facilitates the flow of electricity from a power source to a light bulb, the right conceptions, sentiments, and lifestyle facilitate the flow of spiritual energy from the object of meditation to the mind of the meditator. And in Bhakti Yoga, the object of meditation will be a feature of Bhagavan or Krishna, either his name, his form, his qualities, or his lila, his pastimes. Now one may ask, why do Bhakti Yogis focus on Krishna in particular as an object of meditation. The idea is that the soul's Satchidananda nature, our nature of eternality, knowledge, and bliss, is inherited from God's nature, that we, the soul, are a spark of the fire of God. Because He is eternal and full of knowledge, so by nature we are. And because He is composed of spiritual bliss, we are also composed of spiritual bliss. Just as the rays of the sun derive their qualities of heat and light from their source, the sun itself, similarly, every living being derives its qualities of eternality, knowledge, and bliss from their source in the form of Krishna. So, for instance, happiness is not something that we gain through another source. It's something within us, our true nature, the nature of God within us, that simply needs to be reawakened through the reconnection with our source. But as we move around this world, every image we see, every sound we hear, all of our sensory experience is transferred to the mind, leaving impressions which confuse us. We lose touch. We seek happiness externally. So the solution for the Bhakti Yogi lies in how to engage the mind, not to still the mind, but to engage it or reconnect it with the original source of our divine nature, our own divine power. At the heart of the practice of Bhakti Yoga lies the faith that by bringing the mind to God, it becomes transformed or harmonized with the nature of the self. Deep down, underneath all the layers of the conditioning of the mind, our true nature is the selfless service of love, expressed through qualities like compassion, kindness, and generosity. But those same qualities become warped within the mind and take on a lower nature through our contact with matter. But through bringing the mind back to the original source of its divine qualities, the lower nature can be transformed. Cruelty can be restored to kindness, callousness to concern, selfish lust to divine love. Like this, the qualities of the mind can be harmonized with the nature of the self. There's no longer any inner conflict between the self and the mind. They're united. And another word for union is yoga. Now, the sages of the yoga tradition describe that God, being absolute, is present in a variety of objects of meditation. In other words, God is not only present in His form, He's just as present in His name, and He's just as present in the narrations of His Leela, His pastimes. Each one of these is therefore a powerful source of spiritual energy. So the practices of bhakti are designed to bring the mind into contact with God through these powerful sources. There are many practices that we could describe here to illustrate how this is practically done, but I'll share just a few. Perhaps the two most fundamental practices of bhakti are called shravana and kirtana, hearing and chanting. Hearing means reading and hearing talks of the sacred texts, particularly Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam's verses are full of wisdom and beauty. The stories provide yogic insight to be reflected on, and they give detailed descriptions of the Leelas or pastimes of Krishna, which become the yogi's focus of meditation, a meditation which is naturally captivating. Remember the falling in love that we spoke about earlier? Well, it's through hearing that one can get to know and ultimately love Bhagavan. Hearing implies not only reading these books, but it also means hearing them explained by a qualified speaker, a real bhakti yogi, someone who embodies the qualities of a true yogi and has the insight to speak to one's doubts. The hearer can put forward their questions and receive answers from someone who has got genuine realization of the practice and some genuine love for God in their heart. This can make all the difference. So all of this you could put under the heading of shravana. By hearing like this on a daily basis, all of these spiritual ideas begin to sink in deep and take root. You begin to see the world in a new way. The next practice, chanting, means meditation on the names of God through chanting mantras. One way this is done is as a quiet, solitary meditation called japa, where one counts the mantras on a string of 108 beads. Each bead on the string serves the meditator as a prompt for the next individual focused effort to bring the mind to the mantra and allow the sound to ring brightly in the mind. Let it ring like a bell. Let it ring with concentration and clear attention and good feeling and sentiment. Let it ring through the consciousness. Yogis take lifelong vows to chant a certain number of rounds daily, a certain number of revolutions through the 108 beads, with the faith that the constant drops of water will wear away the stone. Japa meditation is not so different from the practices of meditation in Ashtanga Yoga, where one sits in seclusion and quietly directs the mind to a singular object of focus. But chanting can also be done as a communal musical practice, a very different idea than Ashtanga Yoga's meditation, at least externally. This type of meditation, called kirtan or sankirtan, engages the power of music with many voices singing the mantra as one. It really makes absorbing the mind much easier. The combination of mantra with music and with the communal element is so effective that sages call sankirtan the Yuga Dharma, or the spiritual practice for the current age, where people have so much trouble controlling the mind. Ritual can also play an important role in Bhakti Yoga, which brings us to the third type of bhakti practice, called archana. Archana is the worship of the form found in temples all over India and practiced in people's homes as well. For instance, in a temple we may find, standing on the altar, the forms of Radha and Krishna together. Radha smiles. She holds her right palm up and offers the blessings of devotion. In her left hand she may hold a fan or flowers or some other item she'll engage in her devotional service. Krishna stands comfortably, holding a flute to his lips. The altar is the center of the temple. It's ornate, beautifully decorated, and very clean. The altar represents the heart of the yogi, their desire to keep their heart, or you could say keep their mind, very pure and beautiful, so that Radha and Krishna will happily stand there, enshrined eternally in their heart.